how many events do you guys have in a year? And they're like 10,000. And I was like, you have 10,000 sporting events a year? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, oh, well, the three of us are not going to be able to cover this ourselves. And I started looking at it like, we're going to have to flex up and down to about 150 people. I didn't have money to pay for 150 people. And so we ended up going and trying to solve that problem. And we ended up doing it with computer vision, a subset of artificial intelligence, which is like a big thing now. But so like we started building the system. We found a guy in Poland who's awesome named Paul. He had done his PhD in teaching computers how to understand what's happening in sporting events. And we tested it and it worked. So like we hired him, bought his research from the university, cleared all that, and then set him to work on this. And very quickly, like we had a product that you could feed in a sports video. And as things happened, it was clipping them and tagging them and saying like, this is what it was. We did a bunch of really cool stuff in AI at that company. Like one of my favorite things is we had this hype score, which could basically, you know, yeah, we were doing skeletal tracking and ball tracking and all this other stuff that is like pretty standard nowadays. We were doing it like 5 or 6 years ago.
Hi, welcome to this episode of the Post Military Podcast. In this episode, Cullen and I talk about his time as a pilot in the Air Force, his transition out of the Air Force into a variety of different startups that he worked in and founded. And finally, we have a very deep discussion on understanding your why and how to set that why so that it can become persistent through the trials and tribulations that you might experience as you move from one chapter of your life to the next. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune into this episode, and I hope you enjoy it.
Solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Post Military Podcast. Today, I'm on with Cullen Gallagher. Cullen, thank you so much for taking the time to be on with me today.
Thanks for having me, man. Good to see you.
It's great to see you too. Cullen and I met in a startup, military startup program thing. Right as I was transitioning out of the military, he gave me a lot of amazing advice as I was preparing for my transition. And so when I started the podcast, I knew I had to have him on to hope to give all of that advice and more to everyone out there. Also, before we start, the wall behind you is amazing. Like that's
Oh,
like the
thanks.
sickest, like that's the sickest
Yeah.
like Skype background I've seen in a long time.
It's
So
actually real. Like I see the ones where people have like, they have like, good backgrounds and everything. This is
yeah.
actually real. There's a guy in San Diego that'll do these. They're not that expensive. It's like $1,200. It's
Oh, that's
cheap, but
awesome.
like it was worth it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you're probably on video calls so much, then people are like, "Whoa, that guy's
Well, actually,
got it together."
I normally do these like in my bedroom because I have a desk in there, but like
Uh-huh.
I had to step it up for you. Like this was
Oh,
nobody,
I
not everybody
appreciate
gets
that.
the treatment.
Wow, I feel honored, and thank you for stepping up your game for the Post Military
Yeah.
Podcast. We the listeners, and most importantly, the watchers out there, thank you. So,
Perfect. Yeah. Happy to do it.
all right, so let's get started. Tell everyone out there what you did in the military.
Yeah. So I was a C-17 pilot in the military, both on active duty and in the reserves. The way my military career got started, I was a high school kid, didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I applied to colleges, and one of them was the Air Force Academy. Just thought it was be an interesting thing to maybe try. And when I got accepted to a couple different schools, got some denials to a couple other schools. But when it really came down to it, like my family just didn't have money for college, and they had an older brother and sister that were already in college. And my parents were like, "Hey, you can go wherever you want, but you got to figure it out as to how that's going to happen." And this was late last century, so this was still in the '90s. And even then I was like, I don't want to have a bunch of student loan debt. I know that whole problem has gotten much worse since. But so I decided to go to the Air Force Academy, give that a shot, because it was free and they paid you and you had a job when you got done. And so that sounded like a pretty good deal to me. Also, it was in Colorado and I wanted to go snowboarding all the time. And that kind of worked out. And
You
so, yeah, I went,
basically you described all the reasons why I ended up going to the Air Force Academy. So
yeah,
I feel
yeah,
you. I feel you.
I think it's a very specific set of reasons. There's maybe 10 and there's like four of them are what I just listed, but like, it's not like, there's not a lot of other stuff. Like some people are like, I wanted to go play football and this is where I could do it. Like, but some of the other some of the other reasons, like, I mean, service and commitment and all that too, sure. But like mostly I was like, this is free. um,
Yeah,
but
100%.
yeah,
It's great.
people get in for different reasons. But really happy I did. It was one of those places like I think, the phrase at the time was like bad place to be, but a good place to be from. That kind of still stands. Like if I had to go back and do it again, I definitely wouldn't. Like I would not go to the academy again, but I'm glad I did. Because it probably made me a better person. I would say when I was in high school, like I was kind of like, I don't know, I was just like an annoying kid, and I had like temper problems and all this stuff. And the first time someone's yelling in your face and you literally can't do anything about it, like that temper problem has to go out the window pretty quick for you to be able to get along. And so I think for me personally, it was really, really good. I also met a bunch of great people from all over the country. And then, when I was there, I was on the pre-med track, but then decided that I didn't want to go to more school. So like, I was like, I don't want to go to med school. That sounded too difficult. And so I just, decided to I was pilot qualified, fortunately had good eyes, good ears. I was able to do that. And so, went that track, which at the academy, one of the big benefits, for people if a young person is listening, like it's really easy to get a pilot slot out of the Air Force Academy, where it's actually really difficult in some ROTC programs. So I wasn't the best student of all time. And so, it was actually not too difficult for even a dum dum like me to be able to get a pilot slot. So that was a good benefit, of going to the academy. Went to pilot training at Moody Air Force Base in Georgia, and then the last half in Columbus. Went to Moody to fly the T6, which is a great plane, probably the most fun plane to fly that I've flown. And then, did the T1s at Columbus and tracked to C-17s, big old cargo plane. Really, really liked flying that plane. The first time I flew it was at Altus, where the training house is. And I remember I'm flying this plane that like I think, it can weigh up to 585,000 pounds, which is a lot. But I'm flying this huge plane, and I get in on the low level. So someone else is flying and it was my turn. So I jump in and I'm flying 300 feet above the ground, 60 degrees of bank in the turns. And in the back, we've got like 3 Humvees just tied down. I was like, oh, this thing like flies. It's like a lot of fun. But it's a big plane and there's stuff in the back. And the reason I wanted to fly heavies is like, I wanted to see the world. Like I wanted to, go, I've been to 92 countries at last count. And the vast majority of that is from my time in the military. So it was really good. I was stationed at initially McCord up near Seattle. I lived in downtown Seattle, which is great. And then I went to Charleston. I was stationed there. And the thing it was kind of tough. I would say one of the things that started to weigh on me is like we were gone all the time. So, there's the regular deployment rotations where like every I think 12 to 16 months, like you'd be gone for 4 months at a time. And that was hard. That's fine. But then you would get back and then you'd be gone on the road 3.5 weeks out of the month anyway, because you're a cargo pilot and you can fly anywhere in the world. And so like that really started to wear on me being gone like 250 days a year, like consistently. It's hard to get other things going in your life. Like, relationships and all these other things, like go on a date with a woman and then you go on a second date and then you're gone for 3 weeks and then you go on a third date and then you're gone for 3 weeks. And those kind of like all just fall apart pretty quickly. And so, that type of thing. There's a bunch of dudes as well that were really sharp and like were getting their master's degrees while flying. Like, I don't know how they found the time. Like I was gone all the time. I could barely keep up with life generally. And other people were on top of all of those things, doing a distance learning master's degree. And I just didn't know how they did it. And so, I was getting pretty burnt out, from all that. And in 2011, and that's about when I started to make the transition away from the military.
How many years were you in at that in 2011?
Yeah, so I commissioned in 2003, so 8 years at that point. And then there was an opportunity in 2011. They were doing a voluntary separation program, the VSP, and they had I was deployed to Qatar at the time, and they're like, "Hey, we're letting people out early if they want to get out early." And as a pilot, you have like a 10-year service commitment after the end of pilot training. So I had a long time still to go. I was going to be until 2015, and so I was like, "Oh no, this sounds good to me." Like, I like I like the military, but like I said, I was burnt out. I didn't like people telling me what to do. Honestly, I still don't. Like, I can't. I'm not good at having a regular job, which is why I start my own companies now because I'm no one's gonna tell me what to do. Uh, but so like the VSP was an opportunity. Like, we'll pay you money to get out early because we have too many people in the force. And it was really funny. They opened up applications for this, and I talked to someone in personnel, and they thought like, hey, we're gonna struggle to get 150 people to leave early. And instead they had like 900 signups in like 3 days. And they're like, whoa. And so they like shut the door on it. They're like, nope, sorry. And then they did a weird thing, which is where they went by seniority. Like, who was ever the most senior people, rank has its privileges, got to get out first. So I had a buddy, Bruce, who was literally, he VSP'd and he got out 3 months early and they paid him $97,000. So like
That's crazy.
in the Air Force's great wisdom, like they were doing it how they, everybody like rank has its privileges, but they should have done it the other way. Like, they could have paid that same $97,000, to someone who was, like Bruce just like completely gamed the system. He just got out 3 months early and got all the money he was gonna that they could get. And so, the VSP got shut down, and so I wasn't high enough ranking to get out of it. But then they did a RIF, which is a reduction in force later, which is like the VSP, but it's like less voluntary. So I just wrote a letter to the RIF board and I said, hey, you guys are going to have a really tough, you have a real tough set of decisions ahead of you, right? You're going to have to fire a bunch of people from the military. And I was like, I'm a volunteer. I was like, I volunteer for
Fire
the
me.
VSP, fire me. Yeah, please do.
Mhm.
And so they did. And so I got out a little bit early, and then transitioned to the reserves. I was fortunate to get picked up, in Southern California here where I still live. And also started to work on the civilian side here as well, which we can probably transition to start talking about. But, from my perspective, like that part of the journey is like a little bit different. I know people who have done Palace Chase, Palace Front, that type of thing to transition from active duty to the reserves or the Guard. And mine, I was like, it was just like an opportunity came up and I was like, I'm just going to jump on this really, really quickly, because I was ready to make the transition.
I remember I remember when they were doing all the sequestration stuff like 2012 to 2013. And
Yeah.
the reason why I distinctly remember that is it's the only year in the Air Force Academy history that the Thunderbirds, which for everyone who doesn't know what that is out there, they're the Blue Angels of the Air Force. Every year they fly over graduation. And
Yeah.
that year they did not do that. And they flew over a World War II era volunteer flying squad. And there's videos out there. You can probably look them up. It's very depressing. Watch that, then watch the real thing. And I remember sitting in the stands because they make everyone who goes to that school attend every graduation. I was cooking in my uniform in the June sun, and I was like, this was so lame because they were trying to save my that's
Yeah.
my distinct that's my distinct memory of, like, that entire time in the mi that was my first year in the military, and I was like, "Man, this is gonna be rough if this is this is what I'm looking forward to." So,
I was one of those guys at the academy that, like, if I didn't feel like going to a football game, I wanted to sleep in, or like
you just
graduation
did.
one year, I just didn't go. And then they would go around and search the dorms and see who was still in there. So I would hear someone unlocking my door and I would jump in the closet and hide there.
And just hide.
And like I could wake up from a dead sleep. Like, I would be in a nap
Yep,
and I heard something at the door and I would just jump into the closet, hide for 3 seconds. They'd
and
poke
then
their
go
head and
back to
go,
sleep.
no, it's here. I have to go back to sleep. So I think I went to the first graduation and I was like annoyed
Mhm.
by it. And then I went to my own, which, was obligated.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta do that one.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah.
I wonder how many people would skip their graduation if they were given the option to, but,
Oh, well,
I
at
don't know.
civilian schools all the time, man. Like, people
Yeah,
like just don't
exactly.
even go. They don't even
Yeah,
walk. So
yeah.
yeah.
So, when you were preparing for your would you say did you start preparing for your transition pretty drastically when you thought you were going to get out with the voluntary separation program? Or did you like, how did that what did that preparation look like for you? Because it sounds like it was like a start, stop, start thing where it was like a will they,
Yeah.
won't they for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like, they had the VSP program in, like, February of 2011, and then they said no in like May or June. And then they started the next program, the RIF in September of 2011.
Mhm.
And I was out by February of 2012. So
Oh,
really it was
okay.
like a year, but like,
Yeah.
so there's two things. I knew I needed to get a civilian job, and I knew I wanted to end up in the reserves. Uh, in classic fashion for me, like I was a very big procrastinator on the reserves front. So when I got some time in January, I took a couple of weeks of leave and I did like a West Coast swing. I knew I wanted to move back to the West Coast. And so I went to Travis and I went to McCord and I like submitted my packages, but like all the dudes that had VSP'd and all the people that had riffed and actually like, in September, October had done it, like got
Trying to
hired
get
up.
jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they were all full up. They're like, "We don't have spots for you." And then I went down to March, and that was actually where I wanted to be anyway, in Southern California. And luckily, like that's not an active duty base. It's only a reserve base. There is an active duty squadron on there, but like whatever. But it's mostly reserve base. So there wasn't a flow of people coming across the street, saying like, "Hey, I want to move from active duty to reserves." But because that was the case at Travis and McCord and Charleston. And so I was really fortunate that the one I wanted to go to hadn't had that level of interest. Like people like legitimately just didn't even know it existed. And so I was able to get in there, which dovetailed nicely. So one of the things I would do while I was on active duty is like I did a lot of writing as like just as a hobby. And like in my spare time, I had written just like a bunch of things, and I got connected with someone that owned a video game company. And so while I was still on active duty, I got hired to write for a video game, and then that video game got turned into a comic book, and I got hired to write on that comic book. I wasn't the main writer, but I was like a co-writer. And then that the owner of that video game company was like, "Hey, he's like, I just optioned this game to be a screenplay." He's like, "You should start writing screenplays if writing is something that you're interested in." So I ended up doing that. And so while I was on active duty, I ended up having a couple screenplays option. And so I didn't think I was preparing for like a civilian career, but it was just like, oh, this is something I'm doing. And it would be really cool if you wrote something that ended up being made.
How
And
long
so,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Uh, how long did you how long, like, when did you kinda pick up that passion for writing? Because that's like, going into narrative writing for video games and screenplays, like, that's pretty A, that's
Yeah.
pretty niche, and B, you went to a military college, and, I can say from experience that our writing department, like, it's
Yeah.
not booming. Like, that's not the thing that you go do there. So, how did you
Yeah.
get into that?
I did. Now that I think about it, I haven't thought about this in years, but like when I was at the academy, I remember doing some writing, and I wasn't an English major, I was a bio major, but I would go and I would talk to one of the professors in the English department, and I would give him stories, and he would like just give me notes on this. Like it was something I've always been interested in. I'm a big reader.
Yeah.
Read tons of books. I mean, when you're sitting at 30,000 feet going across the ocean, you have nothing better to do but read a ton of books. And so
Yeah.
that kind of like
Mhm.
builds that muscle. Like you understand what good writing is, and like you start to get interested in it. And like every Irish dude thinks he's got a story inside of his heart. And so like I'm just, a creature
Just follow in their
of my
footsteps.
genetics, unfortunately. And so, I started doing that as like just a hobby. And then like anything, like what's the phrase? Like opportunity is like 90%,
Oh, it's like all preparation and,
yeah. And then,
luck. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, it's like
And so,
it's where, like, where luck meets preparation, I think
yeah.
that's what opportunity is, something like that.
S So I took a snow day up in Seattle, and, I went snowboarding with my buddy Eric. Like, we just didn't go into the squadron that day, and, we went snowboarding and we sat on a lift, and we were having a conversation with this guy, and he's like, "What are you guys doing?" We're like, "Oh, we're in the military." He's like, "Hey, I used to be an Army Ranger." And I was like, "Well, what do you do now?" And he's like, "I run a video game company." And so meeting that guy was like really instrumental, like probably changed the course of my life. Shout out to Mark Long on that front. And like we just would do like mentor sessions. He'd be like, "Hey, do you want to go get some lunch?" And I'd be like, "Sure." So like once a month or whatever. And he kept asking, and he was asking like the questions that you're asking now. He's like, "What do you want to do like later after the military? What do you want to do? What do you want to do?" And I never really knew. And he's like, "Well, what things do you like?" I was like, "Well, I kind of like writing. I write I write emails to the squadron, and I always try to make them funny and like all this stuff." He's like, well, then like, why don't you try writing? And so like, he gave me a challenge. He's like, you should try to write a book. And he said, and he would always say that, uh, uh, oh, what is it? Unrealized genius is a cliche. He's like, everyone's like, I could be a writer. Everyone's like, I could be an artist. I could do
Yeah.
this. I could do all these things, but no one actually sits down and fucking does it. Like you actually have to do the work, and all these things are harder than you think they are. And so he's like,
Mhm.
look, if you really want to be a writer, show me that you can write a book. And so I did. I wrote like a 300-page novel, and it was trash. It was really bad. But he was like, hey, you got some work to do. But he's like, I really like that you actually did it. And I did it inside of like 6 months. And he's like, most people say they want to be a writer and just don't ever put the effort in to actually write a book. So that's when he started getting interested in saying, okay, I can give you work. Like, hey, I need you to write some cutscenes for this video game.
Mhm.
And then he had done a bunch of writing on video games because like he ran in a video game studio. So he helped me refine them, get better. And then that's how that started to snowball. When we got to the part where like rewriting screenplays, based off of like some of his video games and some other ideas and everything, he had made a lot of connections down in Hollywood. And so some of the stuff got optioned, which is not like, it's not like you sell a screenplay. It's like this producer says, hey, I'm going to go try to sell this screenplay to a studio. And then if it makes money, you get to be the writer on the movie. Um, but in reality, like that happens 1,000 times a day and those don't get turned into movies. Right. But so I got to know some people, in the entertainment industry. So when I was getting out of the military, I'd happened to be talking to one of those producers that had optioned a screenplay, and he was like, "What are you going to do now?" I was like, "Well, I don't know. I just got hired by the reserves down in Southern California, so I think I'm going to move down to SoCal." He's like, "Well, hey, like me and this other guy I knew, he's like, we're starting a production company. Do you want to come work for us?" And I was like, "Yeah, all right. Like if I want to give this writing thing a go, like I'll come work for the production company." And I took like a initially no money job. Like I took a $0 job at a production company where I didn't have a title. I didn't have any title at all. And then I became a creative executive. So I would work with writers that had ideas and I would help them refine them and like review their scripts and fix them and make them better, or we'd try and go sell them. And then I became the SVP. I became kind of a business guy at the company trying to get deals done with studios. And so, it was a really weird transition. But like the thing that I think is important is that I had some other outside interests that was not specific to the military. And I think that's what stops a lot of people. There's a very specific pipeline. If you're an SP or an MP in the military, you can go be a cop, right? Like there's a pipeline for that. If you're a pilot in the military, you can go fly for the airlines. But like I wanted to do something different. I knew I liked flying, but I didn't want to do it, for my career. And so I had another interest. Now mine was really weird, and I like I wouldn't I wouldn't suggest that everybody's like, cool, I'm going to start writing screenplays and this is all going to work out because it like largely didn't. Like I still haven't written a movie that got made. But for me, like it ended up working out that I had a different interest outside of what I was doing in the military, and I pursued it pretty aggressively. Like I would be flying and I would be writing stuff and like submitting drafts back to the video game company, and they would send
Mhm.
me notes, and I'd be doing this on the road. And so, you know, one of the things I learned about that from like that I always tell like younger guys in the military, like, hey, how do I make the transition? Is like find out what your interest is and then actually pursue it. Like pursue it
Mhm.
like it's a job. Like you set aside time every day to do that thing, whether it's networking. Like I love that you're doing this podcasting thing because like you have to pursue it. You have to give it a go because whether or not it's successful, like the best version is the thing that you're trying to do, you're very successful at, either initially or over time. But the other version is like you just learn a lot and that all goes into your bag of tricks when you have to go do something else. So then I was working at the production company and I really enjoyed that job. I was making money, but I wasn't making a ton of money. One of the secrets about Hollywood is like nobody makes money until like you become one of the really, really wealthy people. So like there's a bunch of actors that are in LA here that are waiting tables and bartending, and they get acting jobs here and there, but it's not really enough to pay the bills. Then all of a sudden you get put on a CBS show or you're in a movie. Now you've got enough money and it's fine. That's how we were. We were a startup production company. We were living on overhead deals and we were living on options payments and things like that. But we didn't get any movies made. Now my former boss is like the producer of Sonic the Hedgehog, like which is like up until like
Yeah.
last week was like the largest video game movie of all time.
Yeah,
And so now he's
Until Mario kicked him off the curb.
yeah,
It was
I
rough.
know. Don't worry, the Sonic 3 will be all right.
I
And
mean,
so,
I think
so
Sonic was
he
better, so just
okay.
I've seen 'em
Oh,
both.
hey,
I think so I
I'll
thi
let him know. I'll let him know.
I
I
think
haven't
Sonic's
seen the new
better.
Mario. I haven't seen the new Mario movie, so like maybe I'll reserve judgment. But
Fair, fair.
yeah. But so he did the same thing too. Like so, he always wanted to do this. He worked really hard for 10 years to get that movie made, and now he's a successful producer. So, but we were doing that. We hadn't gotten any movies made, which is like what I thought we were going to be doing. The other thing was I was analyzing contracts for like actors and directors and doing all these things like when we were doing business with people and I was complete fake it till you make it. Like absolutely had no idea what I was doing. And I'm like like literally reviewing legal contracts for like $500,000. I'm like, okay, like whatever. And they're like, does it look good? I was like, yeah, it looks good. Like whatever. And I screwed up so much. So I was like, I should go to business school to actually learn a little bit more about the businesses. And my idea was I could go to business school and then move up into a bigger company, like go from the small production company to like go to Disney or Warner Brothers or one of those and then start to, work my way up in the entertainment industry. It didn't work out that way because I decided to do something completely different while I was there. But that was kind of the thought at the time.
That's really cool. What So I want to go back to something that you said, which is find what you like. And I think that that is it's a cool statement, but it's way harder. It's easier said than done. So, and I don't know if you have the answer to this, but I'm curious what your opinion is. What would you say to someone who's listening right now, who's still in the military? It's like, I don't know what I like outside of my job. Like,
Yeah.
how would you advise somebody to start sifting through things that are their hobbies and things that they should pursue very seriously? Because I know
Yeah.
I like I like audiobooks a lot, but
Yeah.
I'm not writing books. So like I like fantasy, I'm not gonna go be the next Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I'm the same
that's
way. Like,
the
I really like cooking, but, like, I'm not gonna open a restaurant. Like,
Yeah,
it just
exactly.
sounds terrible to me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I kind of back myself into a corner. Like, I always do these things, like, that forces action, like, anything that's a forcing function, like, "Hey, I'm gonna be out of the military in 6 months. I gotta figure it out," right? And that
Mhm.
was, like, the closest thing that I had that I was like, I could see, like, a transition happening. And a lot of it, like, fell in my lap, honestly. Like, the fact that my buddies Dimitri and Dan were starting a production company and they knew me and they'd worked with me before and they're like, "You're not an idiot, so like come work with us." But also like I took a no money job. Like I had to say like I've saved up enough money that I can go work for a year or two without getting paid. Which is like now become like a recurring theme in my life, which we'll get to soon. It's just like being fine not making money because like I'm sure it'll work out someday. But like yeah, as far as all that, like I think you have to be really intellectually curious. So I was like one of these dudes that constantly like still constantly on Reddit, constantly reading like, different things that I find interesting. And so, back at that time, I was reading a lot about screenwriting, about writing, reading a lot of books. And so it was like a natural progression. But there's people out there that are listening to this that are somewhat interested in the stock market or somewhat interested in real estate or, all of these different things. I encourage people to like go deep on those. Like, when you're at the academy, they say they want you to be an inch deep and a mile wide. They want you to know a little bit about a lot of things, which is great. And I actually think that like really suits me because I'm a big generalist. But when you do find something that you find a little bit more interesting, go deeper. And especially if it's like connected to money in some way, right? If it's connected to a business in some way, like everything's a business when you really get down to it. So no matter what it is. And so, I think the big thing, like what you're doing is you're passionate about helping people from the military make that transition into civilian life. There are a bunch of ways you can make money at that. If you sit down and think like, okay, what like this is what I want to do. Like, can you start a company that like does like a skill bridge or like Shift, like our buddy Mike over at Shift? Like that's one way to make money at helping people transition out of the military. There are other ways like headhunting firms and recruiting firms. Like, can you go work at a military placement firm? If this is something that you're passionate in, like you can go do that. I like what you're doing because this is more of my style. Like, let's have a conversation. Let's get this out to a bunch of people and say, like, look, you've got options. And so there's a bunch of different things. So like, you're right. Like there's a lot of ways. So like, again, I'll take the cooking example. I like to do cooking. I don't want to open a restaurant, but like, could I invest in a restaurant? If I have a buddy that's a chef or whatever, could I do that? Could I be a franchisee? Could I buy, a bunch of, I think you can buy Quiznos for like 10 cents right now. Like, could you, open up a Chipotle and just run it just to learn the business and probably lose a lot of money and a lot of sleep. But then you're going to have all this knowledge that the next time you want to do one, you're going to be able to do it a lot better. And so, to that end, like, yeah, there is a difference between what's going to be a hobby and what's going to be your job. But the cool part about the military is you can always fall back on what your job in the military was. There's probably something, except in extreme cases, there's something one to one on the outside. Like if you're a JAG in the military, you could just go be a lawyer. But if you want to change and to do something else, like go pursue that hobby. Like the cool part about it is being in the military gives you the opportunity to take a flyer on anything else that's crazy because you always have a fallback. And I set my life up like that. Like when I was getting out of the military, I was like a big CrossFit nerd. And the military sent me to get my CrossFit certificate to become a trainer. And so I was like, okay, cool. I can fall back on becoming an airline pilot. I can fall back on becoming a CrossFit
Mhm.
trainer if need be. I can fly in the reserves to make money if I need to. And so I was like, I had all these like sort of backup plans that allowed me to go, I'm going to go try this entertainment thing. And like, it was great. I wouldn't trade it. It was a really interesting transition, probably very rare for a lot of people. But there's all these opportunities. So that's, yeah, to your point, like finding those hobbies, like find the hobby, tie it to a business, and see and just give it a shot and give yourself some outs with the military stuff. Like you can always go back and do what you already know how to do.
I think that that's awesome. And I think the things that I really want to highlight for people to kind of summarize what you just said is be willing to take risk if you want to explore opportunities outside whatever your AFSC MOS was in the military as you're looking for your next career path or whatever you're going to do next. Um, be cool with leaning into hobbies while you're in the military because those can manifest themselves into opportunities outside of the military, which I think are really, really awesome. And I think the biggest thing that I really love about what you said is you have had no fear of iterating through options. And in the military, I think a lot of people we get one tracked because we're really good at taking input and then producing an output because someone told us to do it. We're not good at going out, sourcing the information, running it through some logic engine or framework that we've built, deciding whether or not it fits the criteria, and then moving on to the next thing. That iteration startup mindset, which you have now because that's what you do. But
Yeah.
I think that more people need to be willing to do that because you can really hone in on what you want. And the last piece is being okay with exploring these things while you're in the military. Like it's not a crime to explore stuff that isn't your primary duty in the military. Like
Yeah.
I think a lot of people feel that way, but it's okay to have hobbies. It's okay to dive deep into these things. And
Yeah.
yeah, which is
I
awesome.
think that I think the world's changing in that regard, right? Like when I was, again, growing up in the 90s, like there were nerdy things, right? Like I was in the band and that was not cool. But like I liked playing drums, so like I wanted to do it. Now I think people are more accepting. They're like, "Oh, you like you like Japanese like Japanimation, like or I don't know, like whatever,
Man,
anime, I guess,
anime, yeah,
manga."
yeah. I'm
Like
one
you
of those people. I'm one of those people.
good.
Calm down. Calm down.
Good. No, that's what I'm saying. Like people like, 15, 20 years ago, people might have like given you the side eye, but now I think everybody's like, yeah, that stuff is kind of rad. Like, oh, I saw
Yeah,
Attack on Titan. That was kind of cool. Like
yeah,
I think people are more accepting of that. And so like there should be no reason. And if someone doesn't like your hobby, who cares? Who cares what they
yeah,
think? They're stupid. So like lean in, do the thing that you want. Like I would always be weird. I'd be sitting on the plane, like kind of typing on something I was working on in the corner, like not wanting anyone to see, but like if they did see, like, now in hindsight, I'm like, "Who cares, man? Yeah, I like to write,
yeah,
whatever." So,
yeah. One thing that I'm really interested in, and I would love your perspective on it because you kind of had this I had a transition timeline that was not dictated by me, and you kind of were not either. How long do you think people should be preparing for this transition if they have kind of all the cards in their hands and they aren't getting they're not there's nothing medical involved. They're not getting voluntarily separated
Yeah.
or involuntarily separated. Like, if people know this is when I'm getting out and they have full control of that, how long do you think people should be taking to prepare for that transition?
I don't think there's any exact answer, but I will say precisely 724 days. I'm just kidding. Like I don't know. Like I was 2 years. 2 years seems like a decent amount of time.
Someone's gonna mark that day on their
I
calendar
know.
now
Someone's
because
gonna
of you.
circle.
Someone's gonna be like,
They're gonna count backwards.
"Today's
Uh,
the day."
I gotta start. That's the guy I never met on a podcast that I need to start. No, I do think like yeah, I didn't consciously plan for my separation, um, but I was happened to be doing things that made it a little bit easier. Um, but yeah, I would say yeah, it's a couple years out, it's like cultivate interests, kind of try and hone something down and think like, what could I do? Like even just sit down and have the discussion with yourself where it's like, what of these things that I like could I end up doing, or where do I want to go? Like I had buddies that like, they wanted to go get their real estate license and they did it. And some of them did it while they were in the military. I have another friend that like was training to be a paramedic. Like think about these things first. And then when you know your separation date, your retirement date, just start working at it. Like just like, okay, and give yourself a schedule. Like, the good thing about the military is you're probably fairly disciplined and regimented and you can commit to something. And so, a lot of people like are like, hey, I'm going to get out. I want to go to grad school. Well, like if you're going to go to grad school, you probably need to start like a year and a half. Just kidding. I did not do that. But like you probably need to start like a year and a half out and start to study for the GMAT and figure out what schools you want to apply to and do all those things, or the LSAT or whatever ones. And so, 2 years probably get just to start to think about it. And then probably that last year to 6 months is like really making that transition. Like if you're just going to go get a job, like networking with people in that industry, going to trade unions or whatever, people that are in that area, going get your name out there. I have a friend named Tanvi, and she like recently was making the transition from a different area of work. She wanted to move into venture capital. And so I would see Tanvi, I was out there pitching for my startup, like trying to, but she was at every single event and she was doing the other things. She was helping people in the community. So she was making connections for me. She's like, hey, I met this other venture capitalist, might be interested in your company for investment. Do you want me to connect you? Yes, that's great. And so as a result, when I could connect her with someone, I would. And she did a really good job over about the course of, 4 to 6 months of going from not having a footprint in that area to having a really big footprint. So she had, done all the networking events, had helped people out. That's again the most important thing, helping people out, not because you want something to come back to you, but it just shows what kind of a person you are. So she helped people out. She wrote a bunch of really good blog posts that got picked up in that community. And then she got a job with a really great firm, by the way, that I really like. And so that's kind of a good model. Like, yeah, think about what you want to do and then kind of make a decision or even two, and then like really commit, look for those opportunities to get into that community. Cause again, it is a community. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the reserves. Like a lot of people, when they go to the reserves, they go rush the squadron. Like they go to the squadron events and they go to like the training weekends and they like bring a keg of beer for their parties and they do all of those things, not because like they're bribing their way in, but mostly it's just like, hey, here's opportunities for you to know who I am as a person. And if you want to keep flying with me, because in the reserves, you end up flying with people for like 20 years straight, like this is the kind of person I am. Maybe we connect. Maybe that'll make it easier for you to extend an offer when one's available. And so that's like a thing I would tell people to do, like start having that thought a couple years out. What can I do when I'm going to get out? Then when you have a date circle, like really hit the ground running like a year out if you can. Yeah, again, I accidentally did some of that stuff. And then I was just like, yeah, whatever. And I do understand that this is more difficult for some people than others, right? Work requirements, family requirements. Like I wasn't married at the time I was separating, I didn't even have a girlfriend or whatever, story of my life. Uh, but, but like that made it easier. And so like, I didn't have any responsibility. So I could do literally whatever I want. And I understand that that's a pretty privileged position. Like some people are like, look, I've got a family, I've got kids, there might be health problems for my parents that I got to be near, and that mitigates all of those. But I think especially like, with this stuff, with, the world becoming flat and us being able to do everything remote, like there's still opportunities no matter where you are. So just, pursue those.
Yeah, and I think that for those people who would say, "I don't have time," I think then the argument of extending out your preparation runway is even more important. Like, if you can't compress everything into 1 to 2 years, then you really should be going many years out so that you're not missing opportunities because you hear about it, but you miss it, and then you don't get to hit it on the next yearly cycle of whatever that thing is. So that would be my counter to people who might say, like, I have too many responsibilities. Like, well, you just didn't
Yeah.
take enough. You cared more about something for someone else than your thing for you. And I think that in a military, we do that a lot because it's the noble thing to do when we're all servants for the nation and for each other. But always have that in the back of your head that you do have to put, because at some point the music stops and like it's just you, and and that's just what it's
That's
gonna be.
I know it. Yeah, it's funny because like as a military person, like you don't want to do that because like you said, it feels a little selfish, but like you have to. Like you're
Yeah.
doing professional development and you're helping out your squadron and whatever else. But like at some point, like you got to make time for yourself, and that's super important because you got to do personal development. You got to do personal development to make sure that you're going to be a good spot. Because when the music stops, it stops. Like, and I don't have any problem with this with the military because it's the same way in the civilian world. Like you're a number. Like, yeah, it might be our squadron's a family. Like, no, it's not. Like, if you don't need me, I'm gone. But that's the same thing in the business world. Like, as soon as you're not making, 4x your salary for your company, right? Like, as soon as you're not generating that amount of revenue for your company, you're out. Like, that's it. And so, like, yeah, it's upsetting, but like, I'm sorry, that's the way the world is. And so, like, you do need to prepare yourself to be flexible and be able to move. And also that way, like, you're not completely devastated when that stuff happens because it will inevitably happen. I don't care who you are
Mhm.
at some point, like airline pilots, like I said, and I know a lot of them and they're great guys and gals, excuse me. But like they fly for the military, they go right into that pipeline. And then what happens? Like, the airline goes on strike or there's a bunch of furloughs. And now they're like, whoa, what do I do? I did everything right. And you did. You didn't do anything wrong, but the price of oil shot up to $100 a barrel. And now you're out of a job for a
Yep.
couple of months or a couple of years. And so you have to kind of prepare these other things. And so you do have to set some time aside for yourself. So yeah, even if you're doing a bunch of stuff for your unit, if you're deploying a lot, like,
Mm.
I'm sorry, like it only gets harder from here. So like, yeah, do all these things that you're talking about.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people, the benefit of being in a peacetime military for the most part is we forget that we're in an organization that's designed to run after you get killed in combat. So like it's redundant by nature. And so
Yeah.
um just remember that. Like
Yeah.
the show is designed to go on without you because it needs to when like the chips are down. So
Yeah. And I would
take some
also
time
like
for
that's
yourself.
really interesting to me too, because like resilience is something that you learn in the military and then you like I like quickly forgot it when I got to the civilian side. Isn't it military like you're getting no's all the time. Like you can't do a bunch, you can't grow your hair long, you can't do like any of the stuff that you want to do. And it's like and then you get into the civilian world like cool, the world of possibilities is open to me and you find out like yes, but you're going to get a lot of no's on the way. So like in entertainment, we would be going around like I would, try and sell a screenplay, or we would go around try and get a deal done with different studios, and you're just getting kicked in the junk over and over and over again. You're getting no's after no's after no's. Now that I'm a startup guy, like I go raise money, like we just raised a seed round, and I think I got 250 no's to get 10 yeses. That's a lot of no's. That's a lot of no, you can't do that. And so I think people just need to get used to that. Like it's a different style of like it's not inner regulation anywhere. It's a little bit more amorphous, but there's still a lot of things that you're not going to be able to do. And the cool part about the civilian world versus the military world is you can push through it and you can persevere. So my roommate in pilot training, his dad was the chief of staff of the Air Force, and General Mark Welsh, really nice guy.
Great
Probably the best
speaker.
best public speaker. I was just gonna say that he's the best.
Yeah.
I would tell him I would go over to their house. He was really funny because like he was working at the Pentagon when I was casual, which is like when you're after college but waiting to go to pilot training.
Were you
And
casual
I
at the
was
Pentagon?
I was casual at Andrews.
Oh,
Yeah,
I was okay, okay. I
were
was
you
like,
casual at the
"That
Pentagon?
was" No, that would be terrible.
Yeah, you're awful.
Yeah,
It's
colonels get coffee. I don't even know what a second lieutenant would do up there, so that's,
Yeah, that's a good point. So I would go to John's house. So John ended up being my roommate in pilot training, John Welsh, General Welsh's son. And John, I would go over his house on Friday night at like 9 o'clock. We'd start pre-gaming to go out. And his dad, and he was like living with his parents because his dad was at the Pentagon at the time. And his dad would come home at like 10 p.m. on a Friday night from the Pentagon, and he would be so exhausted. And he would do the thing I used to do at the academy. He would take off his blue shirt and then just sit at the table, just eating a cold dinner in blues pants and an undershirt. So I would try to ask him about like my career and stuff. Like, what do I do in the military? And
And he's like, "Do not." She's like, "Shut up."
but he said he was like one of the problems with the military is like he's like I'm I got to be a general, and he's like I'm gonna get to change one thing. He's like I'm gonna get to change one thing, and like he had to push and push and push and push, and he gets to change one thing. And then that thing better be important to him. And I think he was great in his job. And I'm sure he actually changed way more than one thing. But like the civilian world's different. You still have to push and push and push and push, but you can change hundreds of things if you do it right. Like you could disrupt a whole market, a whole industry if you do it right. But you have to push through all those no's. So like that's the thing I like about the civilian world is like, yeah, you're gonna probably get more pushback, but your ability to have an impact is actually greater because you can really rewrite the rules if you're successful. And so that always stuck with me. And I think that was part of the reason like why I didn't want to stick it out in the military. I'm sorry, General Welsh. I'm not blaming you for anything. But like I was like, if this guy was an amazing officer for 24 years or whatever, and he's like, I get to change one major thing and that's it. I was like, well, I don't have that kind of time. And so like, I was like, I want to go do things faster. I still have it, but like, I don't know. At least I'm more okay with the idea now.
You feel like you can. So
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
important. And I think we bring up a really interesting thing is like I really do, and I've struggled with this. Like people in the military, like we forget or just we forget all of these like soft skills or things that we've done in the military, or we assume they don't translate, which sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't, and that is very true. But sometimes they really, really do. And so
Yeah.
bringing up things like resilience and being able to handle just really whack things that get thrown your way, like that's a thing that I was surprised how little that existed out here in the big wide world. Um, so I think it's really good that you're bringing it up and highlighting that for the listeners that are still out, or not out, that are still in the military. Real quick, I know we could have a whole podcast on that. I'm just really curious. What is it like raising money right now with everything being what it is, especially like post like Silicon Valley Bank going
Yeah.
like belly up?
Yeah. It's not great. So we knew we needed money by March. And I was talking, we'd done a round in December 2021. And then I was talking to my investor like last June, and he was like, how much money do you have? Cause like the market like was starting to really tank in June of 2022. And he was like, looking at the VC funds, they were slowing down their deployment and they just continued to do so. And he's like, hey, how much money do you guys have? I was like, oh, we're good through March. So I was like, we're not going to start raising until the fall. He's like, start raising right now. And I was like, seriously? He's like, yeah, start raising right now. And I thought he was crazy because like our first round came together in like a month. And this round, like literally we got it done in February. And so it took like 8 months basically, and so and it took 8 months of we launched our product in June, and then we doubled revenue every single month until we were able to raise money. And because people are like, I don't know, this is interesting, but like you don't have the revenue yet, or I don't know, this is interesting, I don't like the market. Like there's 1,000 reasons to say no. It's hard to get to someone to say yes. Because if any one thing is off, they can tell themselves they made the right decision. Now, later when we go back and sell this company for billions of dollars, you're gonna be like, oh, I was an idiot. I could have made a bunch of money. But like you don't get to do that at the time. So like it's really hard to raise money right now. Like I said, I talk to other founders all the time. I know probably 30 founders that are trying to raise money right now and not being successful. Um, and they're like, how did you do it? And I was like, we doubled revenue every month for 8 months straight. That's it. And I was like, you don't want to hear it, but that's it. Like,
Yeah, you gotta be able to be killers in this economy, otherwise you don't make it. And It's
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
I think, well, thank you. Thank you for that perspective.
Yeah.
It's
No
really
worries.
cool to talk to someone who's in that venture capital, like, startup market right now.
Yeah. Oh,
So
shit. This will be a time capsule, man. Be like, because in
Oh, for sure.
2021, people were like raising money on ideas, and like
Yeah.
the next 2 years are going to be gross from that perspective. Hopefully, it'll come back a little sooner than that. But like, yeah, it's not good right now. It's still not good. It hasn't been good for almost a year now, as far as fundraising stuff. And because a
Mhm.
lot of the venture capital firms are having to, shore up companies that they'd already put money into that are now running out of cash and aren't going to be able to raise. And so like, it's just a sort of a vicious cycle on that side.
Mhm. That's crazy. So rewinding, back
Yeah.
before we kinda took this tangent, how
Yeah, I'm
long
fine with
did
that.
you No, hey, listen, it's great conversation. How
Yeah.
long did you wait before you took your GMAT before going to grad school?
I was kind of lost. I wasn't making a lot of money at the production company. And we were, like I said, we were getting a lot of movies made. And I was like, okay, I want to see if I can make the transition. And it was difficult because I didn't have the network, like the network and entertainment. Like everyone came up as like assistants and like, you know, working together when they're 21, 22 for free. And then by the time they get to the age of 30, 32, like some people are in good positions and can get you hired. But I didn't have that because I was in the military that whole time. And so I didn't know a lot of people in the industry, even after working in it for like 2 years. And so I, you know, I was at a New Year's party and my friend Esteban Castellanos, he was in grad school and he was loving it. So I asked him about it and he was like, yeah, you should really do it. You should take the GMAT. So I woke up on January 1st of, I guess this was 2014, and I signed up for the GMAT on February 20th, and then I forgot about it. And then like 3 days before the GMAT, it's like, your reminder, you've got your GMAT Thursday in Torrance. And I was like, what? And so like I took the next couple of days off, and I took a practice test I took a practice test on Tuesday, a practice test on Wednesday, and then I took the GMAT on Thursday. And one of the like lucky things about me, like my secret superpower is like test taking. I'm really good at tests. I'm not a good student, but I'm very good at tests. And so I took the GMAT. I did pretty well. And then they give you your score right away. And I called Esteban. I was like, hey, this is what I got. He's like, oh my God. He's like, you're good. You're going to get into any of these schools that you want. And I was like, all right, cool. And then I was like, hey, one thing about this test, I was like, it was so much harder than the practice test. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, I don't know. I was like, I didn't get to the last two math problems. Like, I didn't even finish the math section because like the questions were so hard. He's like, oh, it's an adaptive test. He's like, if you're getting answers right, they make it harder. I was like, it's an adaptive test. He's like, you just took the GMAT. You don't know this. I was like, no, I was like, I took the practice test that came with the test when you sign up. And he was like, he was so mad at me. He was anyway, like, so I got really
Just hanging
fortunate
out with
there.
Rain Man.
Well, I
It's
mean, just, like, yeah,
Goodwill
just
Goodwill Hunting, Goodwill Hunting out here in Southern California.
here's one of the pieces of luck. So you were talking about this earlier, right? Like preparation and luck and all that stuff. Um, my job at the production company, one of the things I was doing, I was copy editing a book. Like we had one of the video games was getting like a companion book, like, like one of these, I don't know, whatever. Um, and so I was literally like fixing sentences. Like I'd spent like the last 2 months, like correcting sentences and grammar and everything and making sure everything flowed. It's all written from like the entire chapter is written from the same point of view, like all this weird stuff that I had to learn. The entire the entire English section on the GMAT was correcting sentences. I was like, I got a perfect score on grammar. And I was like, yeah, of course. I've been doing this for like 3 months straight, like just correcting sentences. And like both of them, like they would give you like, here's a sentence, like which one of these is better. And I just kind of knew the rules by that point. Like, this one just reads a little bit better. I didn't know why, but I was just like, this actually reads a little bit better. I got a perfect score on the grammar, and it just again, it was luck. It was dumb. Like it just happened to work out. And so again, like doing a bunch of weird stuff, like ends up paying off in other ways. And so, I got into USC, UCLA, and University of Michigan. I went to UCLA, got there again, like with the idea that, hey, I'm gonna go try and get a job at Warner Brothers or Disney or wherever. And I ended up like taking an entrepreneurship class and going, oh no, this is what I wanted. Like I want to kind of write my own ticket. I want to do some of this stuff. And obviously it made sense. Like at that time, like Instagram was just bought by Facebook and, like there's always Uber was a thing, and like it just like seemed like a really cool and interesting area to be in. And so, what we ended up for one of our classes, one of our entrepreneurship classes, you had to come up with an idea, right? And so my idea was like I wanted to remake a sports network. I did my buddy and I, like, you think about it from a problem perspective, like what's a problem that I have? Probably other people have it. That's not always the case. So it's not like a perfect way to do it. But like if something annoys you, just like as a pilot, like I'm a world class complainer about why things should be better. But like that's an opportunity for entrepreneurship is like, if something annoys you and you know it's a problem for other people, just go fix it. Go fix it. And if it's a big enough problem, people will pay you money for it. And so my buddy and I were always trading. I'd text him like, "Oh my God, did you see that dunk that just happened?" He'd be like, "No, send it to me." And then I would like go and try and find video of this dunk on like Twitter or wherever, and no one would have it. And so I end up like recording it off of my screen and then sending to him, or like that would be the trending. They would have 1 million views, and some idiot with his phone pointed at his television, and like that would be the thing. I was like, God. And so my buddy Ian and I started having these conversations. I was like, it'd be better like if there was just a system that was like putting out that knew what you like. Like, okay, you like basketball, you like LeBron. Here's a dope LeBron dunk that happened 5 seconds ago. I'm going to send the video right to your phone. And then like the idea was like if you swipe left or right on it, like Tinder, like to vote, and if that clip caught velocity, so like, oh, hey, 95% of LeBron fans upvoted this. Okay, and then we're going to send it to basketball fans more generally. Oh, 95% of basketball fans upvoted this. Let's send it to just sports fans generally. Like this is like a big, like you just check the velocity of every single thing. So you start with the video that going to the very niche audience, but if it blows out past that niche audience, you can check that virality in the space of minutes, and then everyone in the world could have that clip basically when it happens. And so we built like an app to kind of do that, like proof of concept that we'd send out. And so like we were like sit there, watch the NBA playoffs on our computer. And if something happened, I had it delayed on my computer feed, and then I would do a screen grab and then send it. And I was just doing this like throughout the NBA playoffs. So I like cut like 247 individual highlights, but we got 38,000 views on that. And I was like, okay, there's a thing. Like, so we like made an iOS app, had it out in 4 weeks, 38,000 views on videos that we had sent from like not even that many people. I was like, oh, like people like this. And then so like we decided, I was getting out of grad school. I actually interviewed at Warner Brothers. I was like down to the last two people for a rotational leadership position, which they only hire once every couple of years. And then you like you get to do like 4 different areas at the company. And whichever one you pick, you become like the VP of that part of the company. It's like a bizarre, crazy thing. I was down like from 2,000 people down to 2, and I was number 2. That sucked. A day later, similar situation at YouTube. Like I had gone all through the process. It was down to 2 people. We went with the other person. So I was like, oh, I guess I'm an entrepreneur now. Cause like the only thing I have left is to go try and make this sports network thing work. And so that was really interesting. And we ended up getting a client. Our first client was this company called Eversport. And they're like, hey, yeah, you can use our highlights and send them out to everyone on your app. That's fine. You can do that. The only thing is like, please send the highlights to us as well so that we can put together highlight packages. Like, all right, cool. Yeah, no problem. We'll do that. We'll put them in an FTP or whatever. And you guys can pull them down, turn them into clips and everything of the whole game. And I was just like, how many? And so, again, we were sitting at home cutting highlights, like 3 of us. And we're like, how many events do you guys have in a year? And they're like 10,000. And I was like, you have 10,000 sporting events a year? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, oh, well, the 3 of us are not going to be able to cover this ourselves. And I started looking at it like, we're going to have to flex up and down to about 150 people. I didn't have money to pay for 150 people. And so we ended up going and trying to solve that problem. And we ended up doing it with computer vision, a subset of artificial intelligence, which is like a big thing now. But so like we started building the system. We found a guy in Poland who's awesome named Rafal. He had done his PhD in teaching computers how to understand what's happening in sporting events. And we tested it and it worked. So like we hired him, bought his research from the university, cleared all that, and then set him to work on this. And very quickly, like we had a product that you could feed in a sports video, and as things happened, it was clipping them and tagging them and saying like, this is what it was. We did a bunch of really cool stuff in AI at that company. Like one of my favorite things is we had this hype score, which could basically, yeah, we were doing skeletal tracking and ball tracking and all this other stuff that is like pretty standard nowadays. We were doing it like 5 or 6 years ago. But this hype score thing was like super proprietary to us. And it basically took like all these different inputs from a bunch of different networks running at the same time and said, this play is a 10 out of 10, or this play is a 3 out of 10. And it was really consistent and it worked across sports. And like that was really cool. And seeing how that came together and understanding how those neural nets work, it was really fascinating. And so that was a really interesting job. Got a lot tougher in 2020 when sports stopped being a thing, but luckily the company was able to continue on. I think you mentioned it earlier. We just got that company to a sale last week. So that's
Congratulations.
first. Thanks. Yeah. But me and the other founders left in 2020, and then I went to one of the things that we had done in that company was also clip highlights from esports, from video games. It actually worked really, really well because that was one of the things going into the pandemic. We were like, look, sports aren't going to be a thing, but you could take this exact same model and train it on Fortnite and train it
Mhm.
on Rocket League and train it on a bunch of different video games. And it works. And actually worked better because every sports production is a little different, whether the camera angle's high or low, or if there's a scoreboard, or if there's nothing.
But
Everything's a little bit
streaming's always the
different.
same.
Streaming a video game is the same. Fortnite is Fortnite is Fortnite. And like the kill counter is always in the same spot. Like it's very easy to grab highlights off of that from video. And yeah, you don't have to be hooked into the game data or anything. It's just like, look, the video is the video. And so that sort of take off. And so because of that, I got this opportunity to go be GM at a company called Play Versus, which was in the video game space. Like, oh, you've worked in video games, like about this. I'd sold in our first company sold that the sports clipping thing to a lot of colleges, and now I was in charge of selling this video game software to a lot of schools, high schools, and so I was able to sort of make that transition. And then I saw like a similar problem from my time at Really, we were selling to colleges, and my time at Play Versus, we were selling to high schools. One of the things that I learned was like, schools are like really reliable customers. Like if they want to buy something from you, they have the money and they will pay you because they have tax dollars, right? But uh, the sales cycles are really long. And then even after you sell something, it takes a long time to get paid because they've got to go through all these little approval processes and it's different at every school. And so as a result, like you'll deliver something and then you might wait like literally 3 or 4 months before the check shows up. And like, well, if you're a big company, you don't care. If you're a big company, you're like, whatever, cost of doing business, we can still fund the company notionally while we wait for this check to come in. But small businesses are overwhelmingly who's working with municipalities and schools and things like that. And so they can't deal with like a 30-day cash flow delay. And yet they're fronting the government money for 4 months essentially. And small businesses have a real hard time accessing loans. Like, the banks make them jump through 1,000 hoops and they probably give them a really bad rate and all this stuff. And so we said, hey, like small business isn't the problem. The government's the problem and the government's really good for it. So like, can we bridge that gap? So it's like one of those things like everybody always asks because my career doesn't make any sense. Like you were a pilot in the military and then you worked in entertainment and then you started an AI company and then you worked at a video game company and now you're at a finance company. And none of that shit makes any sense. But like all it was seeing different problems in different places and then just trying to solve those problems. And like the cool part about it for me is like I get to learn a bunch of different stuff. Like I know a lot about AI, which is bizarre. Like that's a weird thing to know about. I know a ton about how the sausage gets made in sports. I know how the sausage gets made in movies. Like I know a ton about video games. Like I know, and now I'm learning a ton about finance. And by no means I'm not an expert in any single one of those because there's like, people that have been doing that for their whole career. But like I know enough to be dangerous. And so like the good thing about all this is like I could go get a job in sports tomorrow. I could go get a job as an airline pilot tomorrow. I could go get a job in finance tomorrow. Like I have the the capability to do a lot of those things. Now I'm stuck in this loop where I want to be my own boss. And so I just constantly like start companies and with varying levels of success. But like that's part of the thing. Like you have to expose yourself to a bunch of different stuff. And if you're willing to go solve problems that are very difficult, then you're gonna be fine.
That's awesome, and it is a very funny career path, and, I remember you were just getting, it's called Lunchbox, right? That's where
It's
you're
called, yeah,
currently at?
lunch.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
it's the stupidest
and,
name for a company.
I remember you're getting that right off the ground when we met, so that's really
Yeah.
cool. Um, so this is actually an excellent segue into something that I really wanna talk about. Um, when people leave the military, they tend to have a significant issue with separating their identity from the military. The military is very much so the way that I tell people now, and if you're a listener of this podcast, you've heard me say it a lot. I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to say it a lot more times. The military is a lifestyle, but we feel like it's a job while we're in it. And when we leave, when we go to our first job, we assume that that job is going to be, it's going to fill all of those like things that the military lifestyle filled, and that's just not the case. For you, you you left the military, which is a lifestyle, and then you really have kind of picked lifestyle esque jobs for every single step of your career because either you showed up and you like, don't pay me. I just want to do it for the love of the game. So you're very invested. Then you go into sports and it's your company. So it's because for as a founder, it's your life. It's not a job, it's your life. And then you've continued to do that. How have you handled the identity shift in that context switching from the military to your first job to being a founder? Like, what does that look like for you? And has your ability to do that improved as you've moved further along in your life?
Yeah, I love what you're saying, that the military is a lifestyle. And I think one of the things I didn't appreciate when I was in is, I joined the military at 17, so some of this is like the military shaping me in that direction, but others of it is like I think like my people are in the military. Like I like military people a lot. I think the outward perception of a military person, if you're like a civilian looking at a military person, you probably think they're like kind of boring and stuff, and not stuck up, but like kind of boring, like and very narrow minded and all these things. Which is not the case. The most interesting people I've ever met in my life were in the military. And that includes like everybody. Like I feel like there's some interesting people, but I think there's like 37 different types of people out there, but all the ones that are that most interesting subset are people I knew in the military. And so um it is a lifestyle, and it's really hard to not get wrapped up to like one of the things I would love if people could do is not associate their self-worth with whatever their job is. So like because that can be a killer, right? So like let's say you are in the military and you wrap up your entire personality, your whole self in the military. And then you go bust a check ride, right? And then you're now like grounded until you figure out, you got to go back and do some remedial training. That feels like that feels like someone is saying you as a person are not worth it, which is not the case. It's just like, hey, you just, messed this up and you got to go back and do some training. If you are wrapping your entire self-worth into your job or into, whatever organization you're in, you're going to have a bad time. And to that South Park meme, like you're going to have a bad time. And so like, that's the thing. It's really hard. It's something I still struggle with because like, you're starting a company and that company is you. Like, like, and it's also hard because, like, you have this idea in your head that you cannot quite communicate to other people that actually know how to I'm not a software designer. So when I'm like, "It doesn't look like how I want," like, I have this idea in my head, but I don't have the skills to translate it to you. I need to become okay with that because the company isn't you. I was trying to raise money for Really, that AI company, and I had an investor say, he's like, "Hey, what you should go do is just like raise $1 million from like friends and family." And this is like a big rich investor guy. And I was like, "Hey, like I grew up like, in a small town in Ohio. My friends and family don't have $1 million." And he goes, "Well, then get different friends and family." And I took that like the biggest FU I could have ever gotten. Like, you're the wrong person for this. What he really meant was like, go do those things we talked about before, like go network, go expand your network, find people that are interested in this, like do all of that, and maybe they'll write you some checks if they trust you and they know you. But like my entire persona was wrapped up in this company I was trying to build. And when someone said that to me, I just wanted to punch him in the face. And I'm like, how dare you, But in reality, and that's the resilience and all that other stuff. But like I had let the, my, you know, my ego get too wrapped up in the job that I was doing. And you need to be able to wash that off. Again, same thing with the military. You need to say like, this is my job and I do care about it because it's important to care about what you do and it's important to feel like you're making a difference. But that you're going to get setbacks in anything. And so if your personality is completely inextricably like intertwined with what you're doing, like you're just going to run into so many problems. And so yeah, I would say, yeah, pursue these other things, really have some passions about stuff, but also keep in mind that you're more than that. Like you are a person, you're probably loved by your family, you're tolerated by your dog. In my case, because I feed her. There's a lot of other stuff to what you're doing. So yeah, go pursue all your passions, pursue them like as much as you can, but like also don't don't tie your self-worth to what your job is.
Yeah, what you kind of touched on at the end there, but what should someone wrap their identity around then? If it's not gonna
Yeah.
be your job, what is it?
Things that matter to you. Like I don't I can live a very simple life. Like I live in a one bedroom place and I have a dog and we go for runs and that's all I really care about. Right. Like
Mhm,
that's it. Like that's as much as I'll ever need.
mhm.
Um, so I don't have in some ways with
You're
the
not gonna have
business,
that yeah, you're not gonna be able to recommend you're not gonna give a blank I don't expect you to give a blanket statement to
yeah.
the world. Um, but yeah, so how do you think
Well,
someone should go about finding it?
yeah, I think this is gonna be very like Santa Monica woo woo stuff, but like I do think gratitude's like a big deal. Like I had trouble with that. Like I said, I'm a natural born complainer. So you go to the plane and like the fuel's not unloaded yet, or you go down range and your hotel room, or your tent cot or whatever is not ready, and you're just like sitting around, like you're mad because you're like, oh, they do this every day and they're so bad at it, right? Like you're mad because
Yeah,
it's supposed to work one way. You signed up, you fulfilled your side of the contract, but someone over there hasn't fulfilled theirs, and you get really mad about that. And so, but like one of the things like I've tried to get better at, and I'm still not good. It's like really just having gratitude. Like I'm very happy. Uh, I'm happier now. I'm happier now with my time in the reserves. I'm happier now with what I did in the military. I appreciate it more than I ever did. And it's the same thing in business. Like I'm still like a disease of more. Like I want the business to be as successful as it could ever possibly be. And I do. I'm petty as hell, and I want to rub it in people's faces later. But like, if it doesn't happen, like I'm not gonna fall apart as a person because I'm grateful for all these other things in my life. So yeah, I don't know. Gratitude is a big one that I'm working on, but yeah, it feels like very like touchy feely.
no, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that I'm actually gonna go back to something that you said earlier about making money in the world of veterans separating out. And I think Shift's a great organization. That's how we met. I think that these recruiting firms like Breakline and other places that help veterans find jobs, hiring our heroes. I think it's all great. However, I think that the actual problem to be solved is um you're letting go and moving on into this next chapter of your life. It's the mental game because like I don't think a lot of people are killing themselves because they didn't get their dream job. It's just because
Yep.
they couldn't let go. And so
Yeah.
I think whenever someone is willing to be touchy feely and say, this is what's getting me through, I think is incredibly valuable because it's a highly personal thing that um not a lot of people like to share. Like people don't like to talk about that because then it means that you're
Yeah.
vulnerable and I appreciate you willing to say like to give your thoughts on it because I just don't think a lot of people talk about it.
I had like a sort of something that happened when I was pretty early in my military career. That we had I was flying out of McCord. I won't name any names, but we had a loadmaster that like I could tell like he'd had some problems at home and like he was in a really depressed place. And I didn't really know how to identify that from the outside prior, but like in hindsight, it's like clear as day to me that this guy was super depressed. And he raised his hand and said, "Hey, think I'm having some problems. I'd like to talk to a counselor." In the military at the time, I think they've gotten a little bit better, but like I still like again, nothing, not a lot bad to say about the military, but this is an area that it can improve is like their
Mhm.
mental health counseling. And this guy raised his hand and said, "Hey, whatever, and they took him out of the squadron and they stopped him from flying because, oh, he's depressed. We got to make sure he doesn't fly. But like, what if flying and being around other people was one of the things that was keeping him from being even more depressed? And so, they stopped him from doing that, and he immediately like spiraled, and then they booted him for mental health issues. And he wasn't a danger to anyone, but danger maybe to himself. But like, I think they made it worse. Whereas they could have worked with this kid. They'd already put, $1 million in training into this guy. So like, why not try and salvage, who this person could be? And they booted him. And that made me like really understand. I was like, okay, like you have to watch out for that stuff, because that stuff's going to creep in. I remember coming back from deployments and everything's cool for like a couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden, like something weird happens, like the bottom drops out and you're just like, I don't know why. And so like really understanding, like staying ahead of that and prioritizing some of that mental health stuff. Again, like I think what you're doing is really interesting. Like uh, there's gotta be a why for everything. So for this, like you're helping people make that transition, and that's important to me because it was very difficult for me. I went from a spot where, like I said, like I didn't think I could really get a paying job for probably like 6 or 7 years after I got out of the military, and now I'm like on the other side of that, and I feel very confident about my ability to get jobs if I need one. Um, and so like that transition is difficult. So I appreciate that you're doing that. Like the other one where I feel really sort of inspired is like specifically around mental health for veterans. And so, we all hear the statistics, 22 a day. I don't know. Hopefully that's gone down, but I don't know that it has in the years since. But like that's gotta be fixed. There's too many good people out there that feel like they're alone and like don't have the resources. But the other problem is like you have to be strong enough to pick up the phone and call a friend and say, "Hey, I'm having a hard time." And so I don't know. For me, like staying out of that loop is like gratitude, but also like trusting, like you said, being vulnerable, trusting other people in your life to go like, "Hey man, I'm about to drop some messed up shit on you right now. Just bear with me." And like anytime I've ever had to do that, like I've gotten such a good response from other friends of mine that are like, "Oh yeah, I'm here for you, man. Like, you want to go watch the game? You want to go grab a beer?" Like anytime where I'm like, "Dude, I'm having a really tough time. I'm struggling with X, Y, or Z." Like you worry about it more inside than what it is for other people. And so like in the context of this conversation, besides like, please military, get way better at helping people with mental health issues inside the military. Please, for God's sakes, people are dying. But in the context of this conversation, like be upfront with your buddies. Like, hey, I'm nervous about transitioning out of the military. I'm nervous about not being able to find a job. I'm nervous that I don't, because some of these things you just have to brainstorm. It's just a problem. And you get into your own thought pattern, your own thought loops, and you can't get out of like some little corner that you painted yourself into, and you feel like there's no exit. You're like, I don't know how I'm going to get a job. And then it all boils over and you have like a huge issue. But like really, you have conversations with other people. They add their perspective. They're looking at it with fresh eyes, and now you start to work your way into a solution set that you weren't thinking of before. And so, um, you know, yeah, to that point, man, like I think being open and honest and talking with people, and like, yeah, it is being vulnerable, and I don't like saying that, but like it is what it is, man. Like everybody's got to do it, and we all got to get better at it. And I think the military in particular.
I completely agree. I think that being vulnerable is tough because in the military, because like you said with your story about your loadmaster, if you're too honest, then you get taken out of the fight. And you
Yep.
can view that as you love the fight and you don't want to be separated from it, or you don't want to be a burden on you need help and you don't want to be a burden on those around you because we have that servant mindset, that
Yeah.
sacrifice mindset. And so it's like, I'm not going to go get help because then my brothers or sisters have to then pick up the slack because I'm what back at the back on like back in the states seeing a psychiatrist. Like, are you kidding
Yeah.
me? Like, I'm not going to do that. And so it's tough, and it puts us in this really it puts us in this very difficult position where you should be vulnerable, but you can't. And I think that the two things that people need to hear, and that's what I'm really hoping that these messages from the podcast get out are I believe you need two things to really make a strong transition out. A, you need community because the moments that you're sad, like you're gonna get sad. You're gonna get sad. It's gonna happen. Like,
Yeah.
and you need
It's
people to come pick you up when you bottom
yeah.
out. Um, and then you also need some understanding of what your purpose or your mission or the next thing is going to be. And because you leave the military, which supplies so much purpose and drive that's given to you. And then all of a sudden, like we said at the beginning, the music stops and it's just you. And so if you haven't cultivated some internal drive, then you have literally nothing. And one of my big inspirations for this podcast is I had the community, I got into a job that I'm still in, but it was certainly not filling me with the same purpose. And I was very sad. Like I was depressed for a year, and I was like, why am I? Like I get paid good money. I live a good life. I've got a fun dog. My wife is fantastic. Like I get to do all this stuff, but I'm missing this. I realized later, like I'm missing this fundamental driver. And really the only thing that kept me going is I had a wife that loves me and community, and I was able to finally say, "Oh, I should do something about this." Started the podcast, and now I can still have that job because I'm fulfilling that core thing with this, and
Yeah.
that's I think very important.
I love
So
that, man.
yeah,
That's amazing. Like, just like kudos to you on that. Like, I never thought about it in that term, right? Like, what is your prime driver? And for me, like, honestly, it's just like learning new stuff. Like, I'm intellectually curious. I've known that about myself for a long time. So I always want to be trying new things and learning new things, which is why like my job history looks so weird because everything has to be new. Like the next company after this one will probably be something completely different again, just because I never want to stop learning. And that's just for me. Um, for you, like you've got this drive to like, help other veterans get through that transition. Like that's a really good drive. And everybody's got to have one. And this is what I was saying before with like, find your hobby or your passion or like whatever. And how could like, I know we were talking about like how does that translate into like something that will make you money. But it really doesn't like you'll never be good enough at anything uh unless like it's something you really, really care about. Right. You'll never be good enough at something to make money unless it's something you really care about. So in your case, like you are doing this, and as this builds, there will probably be opportunities for you to go speak, or probably be opportunities for you to go work for all these recruiting firms to be like a military transition specialist. You will get so good at this that at some point there will be a clear option. Like, oh, this other skill that I spent years developing now could actually make me money. But that's not the reason you're doing it. The reason I've been starting companies isn't because I'm like, oh, I want to make a bunch of money someday. Because I honestly don't give a shit. Like I'm very bad with money. I don't care about it. Like I said, I can as long as I have enough money to like keep the lights on and keep my dog fed. That's all that I really care about. But like, I just want to keep learning. And like one of the things that spins off of that, um, is that you have these opportunities to make money. And so that's not a bad thing. And other people like, by the way, like, unfortunately, money is how the world goes around. So like, you shouldn't feel bad about it. Like, if somebody comes to you with an opportunity, like, hey, this thing that you're doing, I really, really like. Do you want to make money at it? You shouldn't feel bad because that's literally how the world works. And so, but I think you're right. You have to cultivate like, what is your main driver? What is your main passion? And like, really go after that. Everything else will happen. Everything else will come. Like that just is how it works.
for sure. And I think one of my big breakthroughs, and you and I talked about this before we got on the podcast, that I really want to highlight to people. I already said it, that I feel like people think the military is their job, but it's really a lifestyle. And now that you're out of the military, or if you're getting out of the military, please understand you can have a job and also do something that gives you drive. They do not have to be the same thing. We feel like it
Yeah.
does because the military fulfilled both of those things. And there's a perfect dream world in which your job does do that later on in life, but it does not have to. I am a prime example of that. And if like understand you can derive internal drive from something that is not paying the bills, because you do have to pay the bills, and
Yeah.
it is okay to split your time in that way. And I, I wish someone would have told me that earlier, like sometime before I exited the military, because I really tried to find that internal drive in the company I work for right now. And I just was like, this isn't doing it for me. Like, what am I? what am I doing? And then I was like, oh, well, if I just do my job, but I do this other thing that gives me value, then that's okay. Like that is okay.
Yeah.
And that was a major breakthrough for me that I wish someone would have talked through with me before I got out of the military.
I think that's really smart. Like we talked about, like I was saying earlier, like, yeah, don't your self-worth isn't your job. It's what are the things that you care about. And now getting back to this is a really interesting conversation because like it's involving my thinking on all this stuff. This is great. But like, yeah, like you're getting a lot of value out of this, and it's okay that it's separate from your job. But if it was all wrapped up into one, you're like super upset. Like, why is my job not providing like all the value in the world? And the military is good about combining those things. Like your job and your values are kind of aligned. Like you want to help people, like you want to do this stuff. You're in the military. All that is all smushed together. But it's like you said, it's fine for it to be separate. For me, when I was running my first company, my self worth was tied up in that company. And when that company wasn't doing well, I wasn't doing well. Right. That really, really hurt. But now, like I said, when I realized that my bigger drive is just being curious and learning new things. Now I'm in love with the process. Like now, anything that happens at this company, I want it to do well because that's part of like that's the end result of a process that is well run. Is the company does well. But when things don't go well, and in a startup, like every week something is going to blow up a little bit, like, that's fine. I'm separate from that because that's not really the thing. That is the side effect. That is the end
Mhm.
result of the thing I do care about, which is being curious and learning more and getting better all the time. And so like when those things happen, it doesn't completely derail me. And so I like that how you like I've separated my drive, my why from what the company is. And it's easy to get your job mixed up in your why. And when you can separate those, it's actually healthier, right? Because you can identify when it's like, hey, what is it, something really bothering me, or is it just about my job? Oh, it's just about the job. Cool. We'll get to that later. I want to make sure I'm still doing good on all that stuff. And like because my thing is like being curious, like if I'm like getting bogged down and getting too close to the job and getting too close to the company and only thinking about that, which I am very prone to doing, like I just go deep into that. Like I'll like make sure I take time to go read a book or, try something new. Like I did a cooking class recently, right? I was like, oh, I'm going to do a cooking class. That sounds like fun. That's a way to learn something new that is completely separate from this other thing. And so like for me, it is that constant struggle of like separating my why from my job. And like I think that's actually healthy because you can't have your whole life hinging on a job where someone else might fire you or some pandemic might happen if things go wrong. Like you can't have your whole self-worth tied up in that. But if you have your whole self-worth tied up in this other thing that you own and is completely yourself and is all about you doing the process and doing the work to get better at it, you can control that. That is something that you can control. And I think that like the way you just put it is like really interesting for me because like I think it's something that I've like kind of figured out through trial and error, but I didn't have words to put it to until you just kind of said it the way that you did. So I appreciate that.
I'm glad to help. We
Yeah.
provide services
Right.
aplenty here at the Post Military Podcast. Um, the one thing that I will add upon like what you're talking about, if I want to kind of solidify the this thought process a little bit more for the listeners, is your why is important and it's valuable to you because it is concrete and it has a through line for things can change around it, but it does not change. As long as you are learning, whether that's learning through failure or learning through success, it's a net win for you. Therefore, it's a positive outcome in your life.
Yep.
Whereas before, your value was tied into the literal company. And so the
Yeah.
peaks and
Yeah.
valleys of the company was your peaks and valleys of your life. And so for somebody out there that's trying to say like, "Oh, what is my why?" Really try to ground it in something that is not it's not like a buoy that rises and falls with the waves of life. It's something that is much more persistent and constant. And if you're able to do that, then you're y- it- it will allow you to then experience value regardless of what's happening in life. And if it's an
Yep.
organization, you will eventually not work for that organization. Like you just sold your company. Congratulations. But like
Yeah.
it's not yours anymore. And if you're
Yeah.
really tied to that company, you might make the mistake of like watching how they run it and then becoming upset because someone else is now calling the shots. But
Yeah.
that's not
I
what you're
did that. I
doing.
did that, by the way. So, because we left, me and the other founders left in 2020, the company continued to run. And I was like, for a while, I was like Monday morning quarterback, I was like, oh no, not that. Well, that's good, but like maybe they should have done this. And like, dude, it doesn't matter. You don't work there anymore. Just go worry about your job. Go worry about yourself. Like, and so like now, like the company sold, and I was like, oh great, they did a good job. Nice job, guys. And that was a day like any other. Now, because I've been working on this new company for a couple of years now, and so it's like, cool. Let's good. Like, it's really weird. Like, you worry. It's like, it's not like it's muting everything. It's just like, I feel like I'm constantly at a slightly happier level than I used to be. Like, like you said, I'm not a buoy. I really like that phrase, because that's a lot, man. That variance, I can't handle that. But like, if I'm, if I'm lower variance, but like higher average, like happy, like that's a better place for me normally. So yeah, I love your analogies, man. The buoy, because
Hey,
that's I was
I'm full of them. I'm full of those
yeah, that's great.
analogies. It's the same thing that this is not a political podcast, but when people talk about politics, I always try to advise people, like, be very careful getting wrapped up in any specific political idea, because that is going to become under attack. Someone is going to have a
Yeah,
counter opinion to you. And
yeah,
you will be unable to hear that opinion if your identity is so wrapped up in whatever the hotness is, that it's an attack on you, not
yeah,
just a counterpoint to an idea you may or may not believe. And um, if you ground your identity in something that's a lot more persistent than something like that, or a business, or an organization, or whatever it is, then you can really experience life at a lot more of a chill level, because the core of who you are it's very hard to shake the core of who you are should
yeah,
you have that why that's a lot more consistent than any number of things that you could talk about. So
yeah. I
that's
think
that's my thought process on it.
yeah, the politics thing is really interesting, because like, yeah, we're all guilty of that. Like getting way too wrapped up in it. And like I used to be one of those guys, like I'm very big about facts and truth and all of this stuff. And like, I would hear people say things that I just know for a fact are wrong. And I would want to correct them all the time. And I would, when I was younger, I would be like, hey, that's not right. Here's why that's not right. Here's 9 things. And you should read this article full of shit. Like, I'm not going to change their mind over the dinner table. Right. Like, they're like, whatever. And so now I'm just like, I'm fine with disagreeing with people. Like I'll be like, in my brain, I'm like, well, that's not true. But I don't have to say that out loud. I don't have to go, well, that's false. I just be like, whatever. Like I know I believe a lot of things that are totally false on purpose. Like I believe the Cleveland Cavaliers championship in 2016 is the greatest championship in any sport of all time. That one's really close to being true, but probably not. Like we'll give it
If
like Jesse
only
Owens or
Yeah,
somebody like
we're
that. Like
one
he
Draymond Green kicking LeBron and the balls away from it probably not happening. So
Yeah, but also they should have won in 2015, but like
for
Kevin Love
sure,
got his arm pulled out of his
for
socket,
sure.
Kyrie broke his
Kyrie's
kneecap, like
hurt. Yeah,
whatever.
no.
Yeah. But regardless, like I know that that's my irrational love for the Cleveland Cavaliers blinds my
Of course.
decision making. And I'm like, oh, this person just has that for Teflon. They think Teflon causes cancer. It doesn't, by the way. I don't want to get into that whole thing. The other, oh, here's one. This is completely an aside, but don't ever say ghosts aren't real. I have found in my life that literally 50% of people believe in ghosts, and it will start a fight if you ever say in mixed company, like,
Oh, yeah.
ghosts aren't real. People will hate you for that. So those are the two, Teflon and ghosts.
Oh, well, okay. Comment down below if you think that ghosts are real. Oh, it's
So
awesome.
I took this one way off base on that
No,
one,
hey,
but yeah,
listen, hey, we're talking about, I mean, with the red, like, just like your career, like, we just go into different things in this
yeah,
conversation, like it's nothing.
yeah.
One
Career
thing that
ADHD. Yeah,
Hey, listen, it's only career ADHD if you can't define your driving force, which you have. So it's not career
we did it.
ADHD. It's just
Yeah.
yeah, you got it. You
I
have a
gotta
narrative
finally
through
figure out
line.
that through line. Yes.
I love that, and that's great.
Yeah.
So one thing that you said that I want to go back to um is you have more appreciation for the military now than you did before. And
Yeah.
could you kind of talk about what that means for you? Because I do think that there's like a lot. I literally had a guest on yesterday, and we were talking about how like in that last 6 months of your transition, you're like hate the military, and
Yeah.
like you're like building
Yeah.
it up because I think you're about to like break up with, and it's like I'm about to break up with you, so I need to convince myself that like
Yeah.
this was the worst thing that's ever happened to me. But I would really love to get your kind of journey through what you felt and what you feel right. Because I'm assuming you didn't
Ye
feel great things based off of what you've said.
Yeah, yeah, this is we were talking about this a little before, but yeah, I've completely done like a 180. When I was trying to get off of active duty, I was like a misanthrope. I wanted to be out of active duty faster than anything. Everybody knew, right? Like everybody knew, like this guy does not want to be in the military. And now, like I'm in the reserves, and I've got my papers in for my retirement, and I'm like sad, and I'm gonna miss it, right? And so it's really, really weird. Uh, there's a lot of things that the military did. Like I said, like I had a huge temper problem coming out of high school, and the military fixed that like very quickly. Uh, and other things like all the opportunities that I've gotten from the military, like, I've met a bunch of great people. I've gotten to fly all over the world. I flipped a Humvee. I accidentally smuggled guns on the behalf of a US senator. That was fun. Like all these things that I've done, like what a fun and weird, interesting life that I've gotten to lead because of the military. And at the same time, doing that with a bunch of people that you really love and care about. And none of that would have happened. And I think the relationships I have with people in the military are evergreen, and they're deeper than the ones I have with a lot of civilian people. I have a lot of really, really great civilian friends, a lot of very close civilian friends. Some of them are some of my best friends in the world. But like, there's a certain part of my life that they just won't understand because they weren't there, and it's nothing, no knock on them, but like you and I can have a lot of similar conversations right off the bat. I was on the phone with another guy, Naval Academy guy, entrepreneur right now, and he and I just had we met up, and we had a Zoom call today, and he flew Ospreys in the Marine Corps, and did all this stuff, and like we talked for like most of the call. We were supposed to be having a business call, and we were talking about everything else because it's just like this common vocabulary and this common set of experiences, and it makes it really easy. And like that's the thing I love about the military. They take people from completely different walks of life, and they level set you, and they say, "Hey, forget about all that shit that makes you different. Here's why you guys are similar and why you can be a team. Not necessarily the same. You guys all have your own strengths and weaknesses, but we're going to show you this is the baseline for everyone. And then we're going to build that baseline up to make it like a usable fighting force in the case of the military." And that doesn't happen on the civilian side. The civilian side, people do not upskill. They're just like, "Hey, I need to hire for this next position. I'm going to hire someone from somewhere else." Really, they need to be doing a better job of upskilling people. But in civilian world, like you don't have a lot of time. You need a person to be your head of marketing. You don't have the 3 years behind you to train up a head of marketing. But because the military, like the needs are largely static over time, like you can spend that time to build someone from the age of 17 to becoming the chief of staff of the Air Force, right? And so you do have like a little bit of a luxury. The other thing I love about the military is you don't have to explain the motivation. Like we are doing this thing. Why? It's the mission. And like, yeah, that's like an easy answer. But like inherently, I think most people are like, "Hey, I love America. I grew up here and I want it to be better. And if this is what America's asking me to do, sure. Maybe whether or not you agree with it, you're like, whatever. That's not my job as a person in the military. My job is just to do what I'm told. That's the job of the politicians to tell me what to do, and the job of the people to elect the politicians to tell me what to do. So like you are actually removed from the decision making process. Whereas in the civilian world, nobody has to do what they
You
don't
got
want to do. They
Yep.
like
You got to
you
convince
have to learn.
everybody to do everything.
You've got to motivate the shit out of them. And especially if they're in a different organization, like now you're motivating a different person in a different organization to go to bat for you, who they might not know from Adam, and make a change in their organization, like buy your product or whatever. And so that's really, really difficult. And so the military, I love that like everyone is largely aligned around the same goal. And so you can get a lot of stuff done in a hurry. Um, you know, the the things that I think about hating in the military were like sort of the inefficiencies and like people, from my opinion, like, hey, why isn't my room ready? Why aren't you guys ready with the fuel? Like all the stuff that I'm like, hey, this is your job. Like, just do your job. Um, all that stuff, like you forget about. Like you get older, like you just literally forget about it. And I fight with that a little bit still because like the reserves are always calling me up and like, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And as you can tell from my absurdly long hair, I have not been in a while. And I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it. I'm busy. Yeah. But like, and so it frustrates me, but I just remember like, again, like gratitude for all this. Like I get to, when I do go in, I get to fly with really great people. We get to go to cool parts all over the world, see things that I've never seen, and really feel like you're making a difference in a positive way a lot of times. And so like I just have a lot of gratitude for that. I know already I'm gonna miss it. And the reason I think that it's becoming more and more like forefront in my mind is like I see people that have been my contemporaries for, 15 years, people I've known since the academy and they're starting to retire. And I'm like, oh, like it's like the music is about to stop on that stuff. And so it's probably time for me to like finally actually push myself out of the nest. I think like I got off of active duty and I got pushed onto the branch of the tree, like I was in the reserves. Like I didn't fully start flying out of the tree yet. And I think it's, probably time like to force myself to do that. Um, and so like again, like I've really changed. Again, I don't remember many of the bad times. And now like, there's the old saying, pain plus time equals comedy. So any of the bad shit that happened that I feel like I got in trouble for or whatever, like I laugh about it now. I'm like, oh man, I got in a lot of trouble for that. I marched a lot of tours at the academy. That's hilarious. Like, what a waste, right? Like, well, you're marching around for 100 hours and you're like, what a waste. But it's funny now. Like, it's things that you can't even believe you did, and they're like funny stories and all this stuff. And a lot of the stories you can't tell to anybody because they're not. It's going to take so much prior context that when you finally do meet up with military people, like I can tell you, I marched tours at the academy, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, exactly. You know how I would wish for Monday because my feet would hurt so bad from marching around on Saturday and Sunday. Like, that is a weird thing that if someone is listening to this and they did not go to the academy and they do not know what I'm talking about, they're like, I have no idea what he's talking about. But you and I have that shared language. And so we can have that. And so I think you get that in a lot of different ways with people in the military. So all that stuff, like I'm gonna miss a lot. And like all of the ass pain doesn't matter in hindsight. There is pain in every single thing that you do. Like even in the civilian, I'm running my own company and I hate a lot of the things that I have to do. Like, you gotta like run payroll and do taxes. And like, I don't want to do any of that stuff. I would prefer not to, but like it has to get done. And I would rather not spend money on it. I would rather just figure it out and do it myself. And so like that's gonna happen anywhere you are in the world, whether it's civilian or military. So like just deal with it. Like pick your battles. My mom used to tell me this when I was a kid. I never listened to her. And now that I'm getting older, I like literally call my mom like, hey, I should have listened when you would say it all the time, pick your battles. Because some of the stuff just isn't important. Just do it. It's gonna take you less time to do it than it is taking you to complain about it and be mad about it. And so just do it, get it over with, and then the good stuff gets to happen. And so like I'm gonna miss all the good stuff about the military, mostly the people. I'm gonna miss flying a lot. Like I actually like I don't like the act of flying, but I like going places. So I'm gonna miss that. But like in a way that like I didn't think about when I was younger. When I was just trying to get out of the military, I was like singularly focused on like just get out of this military, get out of the military. And now I'm like, why was I doing that? Like could have stayed. But I'm happy that I made my semi transition into the reserves and like civilian life. And now I'm looking forward to like the next chapter. But again, I have a lot of gratitude for all of my time in the military and everything. I'm like sappy about it now. When people are like, "Thank you for your service," I'd be like, "Yeah, glad to have serviced you." Now I'm like, "Oh, thank you." Like it means a lot. Like a weird like light switch is flipped. And but I think that's that comes with time.
Yeah, I think that it's really important because if you have too much love, I want to say too much love because that sounds bad. If you're like what we just talked about, if you're tied super, super hard to the military, just like anything, when the show stops, that separation is going to be very extreme. But if
Yeah.
you have too much hate for the military, it doesn't allow you to appreciate what it has given to you, what it's turned you into, and you don't get to leverage those things because you're not even willing to be um intrinsic or have enough insight to really learn from those things. And so you really have to strike this balance in between, which I think that you have. And I'm going to pose a question to you, which I don't know if you all have the answer to. Um, what do you think that the Cullen of 2011 would need to hear to be in the mindset that the Cullen of 2023 has when it comes to exiting the military?
First 724 days. That's set in stone. That is God's honest truth. Don't forget that. No, I don't know. Like, I think like getting to the why, like we talked about, like not really understanding. Like I felt like sort of adrift and lost and like not really knowing what I wanted, which is again evident by my resume drifting all over the place. But like identifying that through line. So like I would have been a lot more okay with a lot of the things had I known. And I've like time and again I've taken money off the table, right? Like I worked for free at a production company for a while before they started paying me. I didn't pay myself for 4 years at my last company. Like, but I'm fine with that now. And like, and that's because that's the money isn't the important thing to me. Once I learned that, like money can be the important thing to you. Again, like don't get me wrong. If you're like, I want to earn a bunch of money, cool. Go to med school, become a doctor, earn a bunch of money. I don't care. Be a lawyer. Um, Lawyers can be very expensive. I know for a fact, because when you run a company, you have to deal with lawyers no matter what. And so like if whatever the thing is that's important to you, like I wish I would have known. I wish I would, cause like I just felt like I was lost and I didn't know what I wanted to do. But if I would have known like, hey dude, you just want to keep trying new things, like that's just who you are. Like I would have been a lot better about everything. I would have been more pleasant to be around because, when you're struggling internally, like you think maybe you're doing a good job of hiding, but you're not. Like everyone around you knows, like, oh, this guy's just angry about some shit and we don't know what it is. And I hope he figures it out soon because he's really miserable to be around. And so like you just don't know what that is. And so I really like you sort of like what's your internal why, what's your motivation, like, and being really specific about what it is. It's not, you know, it's for me, like I said, it's learning, and like if I can get that by trying a bunch of different things, then like nothing else really matters. Like my needs, my needs are met, right? My dog is fed. She's sleeping over there and looking at me right now. That's it. That's all that matters. I'm doing the stuff that I want to do. Like whether or not anything else good comes out of it, that's fine. Who cares?
I love that. I think that that is such a wonderful expression of what drives you, and it's also something that I think everyone in the military can learn from, because we're saying a lot of high concept shit, which was just find your internal driving like force, which is hard. And
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people listening to this go, well, I don't know. And I think that the best thing that people can take, in my opinion, from what you have said, is until you find your internal driving force that is persistent, consistent, is not affected by the peaks and valleys of life. Find value in the process. Like, if you go down this rabbit hole and you're like, I think that this is the thing, and it doesn't turn out to be that thing, well, you've now removed one option off the board. So you're just a little bit closer to figuring out what that is. And that in and of itself has made you a better person.
Yeah.
And it's okay you learn in failure just like you learn in success. And you're not going to get it right the first time. If you do, that's fantastic. And I'm super happy for you. When you get out of the military, whoever you are, hit me up. I'll have you on the podcast and we can talk about
Yeah.
how you crushed it. But find value in that process of the search, because I had a lot of stress associated with my search and it was not healthy. And so and I'm still figuring it out. Like,
Yeah.
this is just the most recent thing in a string of things that I'm trying to really nail down who I am as a person. So
This is the next
um
part of the process, man. And like you seem like, like and you'll get to that point with this one, like, hey man, I'm getting like too wrapped up and like what's the next part of the process? Like you gotta get there. And like I really love that. It's funny that you mentioned like I could I'm like in my brain I'm imagining like it's this really hard thing to tell someone in the military. Like it's just like Gwyneth Paltrow walking into a team of Navy SEALs and going, "You must find your inner purpose." And then them all being like, "Get the fuck out of here, lady. What are you talking about?" And it's like, but like, honestly, I think every single person I know that's made the transition from military to civilian has had to figure that out. Whether or not like it does sound like some Malibu type stuff, like you do have to do it. It's gonna happen. And either you're gonna fight it and it's gonna be the hard way, which just sounds like you and I had to do, or you could actually just sit down and think about it a couple times a month. And then, and within a year, you're gonna know. And you have conversations with your wife or with your friends or like whoever. Have those conversations. Be like, hey, we're gonna talk about some foo-foo stuff right now, but I'm trying to figure out my purpose. And once I get that, everything's gonna be chill. Like, yeah, it doesn't seem like something that's gonna resonate with someone in the military right now, but I'm telling you, if you're in the military right now, you have to figure this out. You're going to figure it out one way or another, and it's going to be either painful or you can just start doing the work right now.
I'm hoping to curate hundreds of podcast episodes of people saying this exact thing so that someone eventually will go, huh, maybe I should do, maybe I should do
Yeah, exactly.
because I don't know if I would if I when I was in, I really don't. And so I'm hoping that people who are listening who are in are wiser than me. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
would
and
look
I
at that.
think
I mean, I remember being at the academy and seeing my AOC, my air officer commanding, and he was a captain. I was like, oh my God, that guy's so old. And I'm like
old.
so much older than that guy now.
Ew.
So like I imagine someone watching this and be like, oh, this guy, this old dude.
Yeah, down the line. And I'll get to that eventually, but the
Yeah.
one thing that I do wanna touch on that you just said that I think is really good is the military really if you take time to ponder this problem, the military really does give you everything that you need to at least start. And some people might go, "Well, I hated my time in the military." And I go, "That's great. Now you know a whole list of things that you probably shouldn't go do the next time when you get out." And, like,
Yeah.
that's valuable. Like, I the thing that frustrates me so much is I've got friends who are pilots who are like, "Dude, I can't wait to get out of the military." And I'm like, "Why?" And they're like, "I'm just gone all of the time for my family." And I was like, "Yeah, that does suck. Like, what are you gonna go do next?" They're like, "I'm gonna go fly for the airlines." I was like, "Aren't you gone a lot in the
Yeah.
airlines?" They're like, "Well, it's gonna be different." I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe, but it also might not be. And so, like, they should take that and go, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't be looking into career options where I'm gone all the time." Like,
Yeah.
that's what the
I mean,
military has taught you in that scenario. So, I don't know.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, look, you might have nailed it. You might really love aviation. You might be okay with the amount of time being gone. And so you go be an airline pilot and everything's fine. But if you've identified that the thing that is important to you is to be a good parent and a good husband or a good wife or whatever, and being home a lot, then yeah, you can still go to the airlines where you're going to sit a lot of reserve. You're going to make less money, but you should also cultivate that thing that you care about. Like go coach your kid's baseball team, right? Like go be at your daughter's dance recital. Like go support your wife when she's got something going on in her life. Like you go do those things and prioritize those because that's supposed to be what makes you happy. If you think that like I will be happy later when I make a bunch of money, like you're just never going to be happy. I hate to tell you, it's just never going to. It's a lie. And so, like, identify. I hate to say it, but say it again. Like, identify what's important to you and go do that. And you can make it work in the context of I like to be home a lot, but I'm going to be an airline pilot because that's what I know how to do, and that's the easiest transition for me to make. You can still do it. You're just going to make less money at the airlines because you're going to drop trips and you're gonna sit reserve at home. But that's a trade off that you've already decided. You've already decided you're willing to make. I want to be there for my kids' stuff, and so that's the one you've already made it. Just actually do it now.
Yep, I completely agree. And once you understand what those values are, really stick to them because you're gonna have moments where that sacrifice you made is gonna like rear its head and you're gonna feel like you made the wrong choice. So really anchor yourself to those decisions because that's what's gonna get you through those bad moments where you might not be making as much money or whatever the thing is. Um and so really identifying those values is incredibly important. But Colin, this has been great, dude.
Yeah, this is fun.
This has been awesome. Last thing before we go, any final piece of advice besides 700 and however
It's
many
4 days.
days? Yeah,
Uh,
724 days. Anything else that you want to leave the listeners with?
yeah, well, yeah. Enjoy it. Number one, while you're in the military, because it's different on the outside. But number two, don't stop planning. Like, don't like identify what you care about and go after it pretty hard. Oh, yeah. But yeah, and then like I also like to mix in like make a bunch of stupid decisions. My co-founder like will be out and telling stories. He's like, I should do more dumb stuff. He's like, they seem to make for good stories. So like, yeah, don't be afraid to do dumb stuff. Anything that happens to you now, like it's not going to end your life, right? Like you're like you get in trouble for whatever, who cares? Like it's fine. You'll be fine. So I don't know. Yeah, that's about it, man. I really like that you're doing this. This is something that means a lot to me, because I did struggle with the transition from military to civilian life. So I appreciate that you're doing this. If anyone else needs anything from me, if anyone wants to bug me and ask me questions, like more than happy. I make time for anybody, any military person. I always make time for. Some other people, like business wise, I might blow them off, but like if you were in the military, I'll make time.
That's awesome. And I think that's the last thing we'll leave people with. Reach out to veterans. They are
Yeah,
always willing to help people transition out of the military. Like, this is a great community. Please leverage it. You have so many options, people, talents, experiences that you can delve into. So really, really do that. Um, Cullen, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. It's been
yeah,
absolutely fantastic to get to talk to you and learn about your absolutely wacky career and all the
yeah.
crazy things that you've done. And thank you for really coming on and being real and burying yourself before the people.
Appreciate it,
It's a
man.
hard thing to do, and I'm very grateful that you decided to do that, for everyone today. And for everyone that's out there, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. If you find the content valuable, please, like, comment. We want to hear what you have to
Smash
say,
that like,
and
smash that
smash
like
that
button.
like button, and share it with the people that you know that are still in, because they're the people that need to hear this more than anything else. So,
Yeah, for
uh,
sure.
thanks everyone for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Post Military Podcast. Peace.